Okay. Thursday, October 8th, 2015. This is Real in the Field Goals, the weekly podcast where we talk about the Seahawks and the opponent that they're going to be taking on this week, as well as the instant reaction show that takes place right after the game every week. And today we are talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Coming up later is Ken Broo, a radio host in Cincinnati, who will tell us just what exactly is going on with Andy Dalton, who is now recognized as the best quarterback in the world. And that's something that everybody believes. So we'll get to that and so much more this week. As always, Real in the Field Goals is brought to you by the Ballard Agency. I'm not hearing enough about people telling them that Field Goals sent them. So make sure that you do that. If you come across anything that's Ballard Agency, just say, hey, like the Field Goals Ballard Agency? That enough will be just a great pleasure. You can also call them up and tell them at 425-454-3510 and tell them Field Goals sent you. BallardAgency.com, insurance needs for everybody. So let's get right into it. The Seattle Seahawks, Danny, I think that it's something that I said on Twitter this week, and I do believe it. I thought that the Seahawks had a good chance of beating the Packers in Green Bay just because, it's Sunday Night Football. They've beaten the Packers. It seemed like something where I could believe it, and I could still see the Seahawks beating the Bengals, of course. I just think that it's probably the toughest game that I remember them playing in the last 3 years, at least headed into a game. What do you think that the Seahawks have to do this week in order to get a win?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this on paper looks like one of their toughest games on the schedule. Going to the East Coast, early game against like a red hot Bengals team. I think the Seahawks are going to have to do a couple of things. Obviously, they need to start turning the ball over. That's the big thing. Obviously, I don't think they're going to be able to go into Cincinnati and turn the ball over. I mean, maybe they can't even turn the ball over if they want to win. They certainly can't do it 3 times like they did last week. And so that's number one. Obviously, take care of the ball, and that's obviously kind of a cliche at this point, but it's true. Got to see Russell Wilson, squeeze the rock when he's getting rushed by 12 different Bengals at any given time. But yeah, I think they need to get the run game going a little bit more this week. I think just keep doing what they're doing on defense. I'm actually really happy with how the defense has been playing. So I think as long as they kind of just keep doing what they're doing, rushing the passer, moving him off his spot, playing the deep ball well, then they'll be fine. But they're going to have to start a little bit faster, I think, because I heard the Bengals, I think Davis Sue tweeted this the other day, the Bengals score a ton of points in the first quarter, so it wouldn't be surprising to see Seattle get off to a early deficit, and then they'll have to work their way back into it. But I think if they could start things off a little quicker and on offense this week, it's going to go a long way.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough game. I'm getting a little bit of echo.
For me?
I was getting an echo on the words that I'm saying.
No, I can't hear it.
Well, I was, but it sounds like it's gone away now. Anyway,
all right.
I guess just remember to go back and cut that part out.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, okay. A lot of talk this week about the offensive line, and they haven't tweaked that line at all over the last over the 4 weeks this year. And then I would say it's been the same since the second or third preseason game. They've gone with the same 5 guys as the starting unit. Yeah,
I think something like that.
And they haven't tweaked it at all. Are you at all surprised, or do you think that Tom Cable means it when he says that this offensive line is going to be really good once you give him enough time?
I mean, it's a little surprising, especially since Patrick Lewis had quite a few starts last year. Has some experience. Lemuel Jean-Pierre is still out there in free agency. He's kind of an established veteran. He's not necessarily going to light the world on fire, but I don't know. It's like, how do you get worse than really what they're doing right now? It just, nothing is really working. So I guess they're kind of just going through it with the commitment that they think it's going to pay off down the line to get these guys through the crucible that they're kind of going through right now. But it is surprising to me. And I guess it's like, what kind of indictment is it on Alvin Bailey that he can't get in there, even though Britt's been really awful? Yeah, and that kind of probably goes to why he tweeted what he tweeted the other day, saying, he can think of 31 other cities that he wants to be in right now besides Seattle. But
I don't know if necessarily 31 cities are calling back the guys that can't crack Seattle's starting lineup. No offense to Alvin.
Right.
It is kind of weird how those types of things have progressed, because it was 2 seasons ago that everyone was talking about Alvin Bailey as like, oh man, this guy has got the potential to be a great left tackle even if he keeps it up.
Right.
And he's not even a guard. He's not even anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same way with like the Mariners, sort of, in a way, where they get these prospects that they, for some reason, don't seem to be able to put it together at the major league level, and they talk about, is it a problem with development? And do you think that there might be an issue with the Seahawks being able to develop, or is it just simply the fact that they aren't, lately really they haven't really been putting in a lot of investment into their offensive line? They started out doing it with Okung and Carpenter, and Max Unger, and all these. Now they're sort of like saying, screw it, like even when they get a guy like Justin Britt at the end of the second round, I mean, he's not playing where he was supposed to play.
Right.
So do you think that Tom Cable, a lot of people do not like Tom Cable now. They've changed their opinion based on this whole 6 sacks and all that kind of stuff and how ugly it is. Do you think that Tom Cable is a bad offensive line coach?
No, and I don't think first of all, I don't think it's a development thing. I think if you look at what the Seahawks are putting on the line, it's 3 guys playing new positions. They got Gary Gilliam, who had no starts at right tackle. They got Justin Brett, who had no starts at left guard, now playing left guard. They had Drew Nowak, who used to be a freaking defensive lineman. They have, it's like they're putting all these new guys on there. And you have to expect that if you do that with, 3 out of 5 of your offensive linemen, it's going to look a little crappy. That said, I think, I saw the stat that they're dedicating, I think, 3rd least amount of money to their offensive line of any team in the NFL. So obviously the investment there is light, in terms of the money thing. And I think that even relative to a lot of teams, I think that the draft pick, investment there is pretty light as well. You're using like mid-round to late-round picks on these guys. A couple of them are, undrafted types like Gary Gilliam and Drew Nowak. I think that, Tom Cable's never been known to be a good pass protection guru or anything like that, but I think the numbers speak for themselves with the offensive line. Like everyone talking about how the offensive, like the Seahawks run game has only been good because of Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson. I think that's a bunch of bullshit. Like you can't lead the NFL in rushing by like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a good run blocking offensive line. Sorry, you just can't.
Yeah.
I think that's super naive of anyone to think that. But that said, obviously they have a big part of that, and they make the whole offensive line, they make Tom Cable look better because they're so good. But if you look through Tom Cable's history as an offensive line coach, like pretty much everywhere he goes, he's very consistently produced really strong run games. And the zone blocking scheme that he employs, that he teaches, that he learned from Alex Gibbs, everywhere it's done well in the run game. It's the system. The system is good, and I think he teaches the system well. I think people who, like I said, I think if you don't think Cable has an effect there, then I think you're probably letting your personal feelings about how the pass protection's gone like influence that thought. So all that said, I think, they place a lot more value on run blocking. I think, especially considering they're not investing very much in the offensive line in terms of money. I think, you're finding guys that are probably not all around good players. Essentially they look for a certain amount of attributes and they go get those attributes and then try and coach them up. So it's I'm not blaming Cable like individually. I think it's a organizational decision and organizational failure if the offensive line continues to go this long. I think, it's not like Cable's in there scouting the offensive line like all offseason. Like there is a scouting department. John Schneider's involved. Pete Carroll's involved. So it kind of bugs me when people are like, oh, fire Tom Cable. It's like, okay, that's not really the only issue here.
Yeah.
That's not going to fix anything. That's like the Mariners thing, oh, fire the hitting coach.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought like, the exact same thing, That's what
he'd be a scapegoat, really.
They're just everyone wants someone to blame, and the last people that usually that they want to blame is the players. It seems like, and especially not Pete Carroll. And I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not blaming really Pete Carroll either. I just think that look, I mean, they didn't put a bunch. I mean, look at the team that they're playing this week, the Cincinnati Bengals. When you look at their offensive line, and I'm trying to, but their right tackle Andre Smith was like the sixth overall pick.
Yep.
Their left tackle Andrew Whitworth. I don't know where he was drafted. It looks like he was a second-round pick, and he's one of the best tackles in the NFL.
Zeitler's a first-round pick in 12.
Yep. I mean, they've put. I mean, just this year they spent a first-round pick on Cedric Ogbuwe, another tackle. So they're prepping for the next generation.
Fourth-round pick.
Yeah.
The left guard was a fourth-round pick. Yeah.
So decent picks and good picks. And like I said, this year they drafted a tackle in the first round. So they're getting ready for, one of their tackles to retire or whatever and move on. But when you look at compared to the Seahawks, you've got Okung, who was, the sixth overall pick. Mm-hmm. And Justin Britt, who was the end of the second round, was supposed to be a tackle, and he is not. Their center is undrafted. Their right guard is seventh round, and he played defensive line. And their right tackle is a tight end that was undrafted. Mm-hmm. So comparing, and the Bengals have a really good offensive line. They've only given up 2 sacks all year. It's going to be really difficult to get to Andy Dalton. When you look at their running backs, Giovanni Bernard is averaging 5.5 yards per carry. Jeremy Hill has 5 touchdowns. AJ Green is able to go downfield, and Andy Dalton has enough time to throw it, and he has 417 yards. So there is a lot of reason to, have an investment in offensive line. And, the Bengals did that. The Seahawks went another route. They're trying to do something different. And obviously I think the Seahawks model is working for the last couple of years. And we'll see how it works now. The funny thing is, as bad as the pass blocking was on Sunday or Monday, Russell Wilson had one of the best statistical games of his career, other than the fumbles.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I mean, 11 yards per catch. And I think that Darrell Bevell just crushed it with the pass plays that he called up. I mean, would you agree? No. I think that Darrell Bevell is a good offensive coordinator, which people disagree with vehemently. But half the teams in the NFL don't have an offense as good as Seattle's, I think. Right now it doesn't look good, but you could have said the same thing in 2012. You could have said that, for the first 8 games or 10 games. And then it just clicks at a certain point. Russell Wilson is one of the best statistical quarterbacks in the NFL. Marshawn Lynch is the leading rusher since 2011. This is all under Darrell Bevell. So, and again, their top 2 receivers were undrafted free agents. I mean, they're not working with a whole lot, and it still seems to get done. If you put the same offense in Oakland, it would be ranked 32nd, I think. If you had the same sort of philosophy of we're not going to, they've tried to draft receivers, obviously. They've spent a first-round pick on Jimmy Graham and a first-round pick on Percy Harvin and all that. But, yeah, it's just, to me, it's like I think that they're trying to have a great defense and a great running game and have explosive pass plays. And they think that's going to get them to the Super Bowl, and it has for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So I would say that it's working, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we've talked about this in the past. It's like, I mean, how many teams are really, really good at every single position? It's rare.
Most. Oh, yeah, I mean, it's rare.
And the fact that the Bengals are kind of one of the teams that, have kind of managed that.
Yeah, they're crushing it right now.
And look how well they're doing. But I mean, at the same time, it's like, yeah, I think it comes down to expectations. It's like, really, can you expect every unit on the team to be like elite? Like, that's not reasonable, especially 5 or 6 years in when you're going to have to pay all these people. So, yeah, I mean, it's the offensive line is a major issue. And I'm not like trying to blow smoke up anyone's asses and say it's really good or anything like that. It's been a problem. But it's something that, makes a lot of sense based on kind of what they've put into it. And, I guess where they, like what they are, or the personnel that they have on that line right now. I think obviously letting their first round pick in James Carpenter go they didn't want to sign him in free agency, and he's playing pretty well for the Jets. Obviously, John Moffitt decided he didn't want to play football. So that's another miss or whatever, and then they've missed on other guys along the way. But overall, I mean, they're really their offensive or their identity has been in investing into defense and trying to find explosive players and everything like that. So
Right.
I don't know.
When people would complain about James Carpenter and like, yeah, let him go nonchalantly, I think that people really didn't appreciate what the alternative could be, because, I mean, Justin Britt looks awful out there. In the last game, it was just kind of just funny, and to a certain extent. But yeah, the offensive line is bad, but I think, you sort of got what you paid for. I mean,
right.
Justin Britt obviously was physically talented. That's why he went in the second round without, that's why the Seahawks liked him. Obviously, they like that kind of stuff. And I think, you could go down in 2 years and say, that if they do it right, maybe, I could see Christian Sicoli being a good center, or, Gary Gilliam being a good tackle. But this is the early stages of that development process. These were guys that were not slated to be starters just a couple months ago. Right,
exactly. And I mean, most offensive linemen that you draft, other than out of the first 2 rounds, are going to come in and start immediately. And in many cases, when they do, they suck initially. I mean, look at second overall pick for the Rams. I'm blanking on his name, out of Auburn. Yeah, Greg Robinson. Like, he sucked his first year, and he's the second overall pick. Basically one of the best players in the draft by most people that were, kind of doing the draftnik thing. So, I don't know.
It is one of the most. It is definitely the position. You make a good point. The position is one in which a lot of the rookie mistakes show up. Very obviously, like a lot of these guys. Yeah, like you're saying, top 10 pick type guys like Jake Matthews and Luke Jokel and Eric Fisher and Andre Smith and Greg Robinson. It's such a difficult position to start out with, because it's basically just a mano-a-mano of Gary Gilliam versus Ezekiel Ansah, and it's like you're going to lose that. Gary Gilliam has not been out here for very long. Ansah is only a second-year guy, but he came in with a pedigree of this guy's going to be one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, and he's in his second year. So it's something where you're going to get destroyed. And they're looking at problems this Sunday, facing off against, Carlos Dunlap, who has 3.5 sacks so far in 4 games. Dunlap, he was a second-round pick. He has not been like the type of guy that necessarily I think a lot of people think about. He's never been a Pro Bowler, but he does have, he's consistently getting sacks, and he should possibly have a big game. Geno Atkins obviously is considered perhaps one of the best defensive tackles in the game. He has 3 sacks, and he's now looks fully recovered from the ACL injury. He only had 3 sacks last year in 16 games, but he's got 3 this year. So there's going to be some issues up front. It's a really, really talented team. And I mean, Adam Jones is playing like a number 1 corner. That's a guy who was a first-round pick a long time ago. They've got a lot of first-round picks on this team, and a lot in the secondary. Leon Hall, Darquez Denard. Any guys that you specifically, because I know you look around the NFL, and I know you've recently written an article about Andy Dalton. Is there any players on the Bengals that you especially admire?
Yeah, I mean, I think offensively they've got a lot of really good weapons. Obviously, A.J. Green is probably one of the best receivers in the NFL, and then Mohamed Sanu and Marvin Jones are among the best kind of 2-3 types, 2 and 3 receiver type guys. Sanu's like really tough, physical dude. Marvin Jones, pretty underrated guy as well. And then, they've got, Tyler Eifert, who looks like he's kind of blossoming this year as like a number 1 type tight end. And then, they've got 2 really good running backs, plus Rex Burkhead is kind of an interesting guy too. They're trying to kind of turn him into like a slot receiver, kind of like, I don't know, kind of like a Danny Woodhead type, but more, in the slot or whatever. So yeah, they've got a lot of really interesting offensive weapons, and I really like kind of their offensive scheme. Let's say Hugh Jackman? No, Hugh Jackson.
Yeah, that's all
He's
right.
their OC, and he's kind of he's creative. They do a little bit of read option. They do some interesting stuff like reverse.
They could nickname him Huge Action. I though like that sounds like. I mean, if you got they got 15 yards per catch or whatever, I would call him Hugh Jackson's Huge Action.
Yes.
We'll have to bring that up with our guest Ken Broo. Maybe we won't.
Yeah, maybe not. I think, and then if you look on the defense, sounds like Drake Kirkpatrick is kind of coming into his own. George Aloka, who is the Boise State guy, kind of like in the physical, mold of Cam Chancellor. He sounds like he's playing really well. They've just kind of got talent everywhere, and they've done it all through the draft. So credit to them. Like, they don't really get a lot of credit, I don't think, for what they've done there in terms of drafting. Like the Seahawks and the Packers and whoever tend to get a lot more credit. But like, that's a really good. They did a really good job of putting that team together through the draft.
It's pretty wild. Like, I mean, the Bengals. Do you think that when do you think you'll be ready? Like, it really has to happen, it feels like, but I'm still not ready to accept that the Bengals will win a playoff game. They have been to the playoffs 6 times since 2005. They have not won a single game in the playoffs. Their last playoff win came in 1990. And, it's interesting that they've given Marvin Lewis such a long leash. And most organizations wouldn't do that. I assume that Lewis is sort of family at this point, but they do have to sort of win a playoff game this year. Do you think you're ready to accept that, or it just you have to see it to believe it?
I mean, I don't know. I don't put as much stock in like past performance is predictive of future performance type thing. Like in terms of the playoffs, like, I mean, this is a different team than the last year, it kind of thing. Like the same with the Seahawks. It's like, they're who they were, last year, 3 years ago. It doesn't really affect who they are now. So I think, I don't put it past them to win a game or a playoff game or two this year. I don't think it's like some mystical, like, wall that they have to climb or whatever,
I think that's a mistake, man. You look at the Lions game on Monday Night Football, I'm telling you, past always seems to rear its head in. You look at the Rams every year, just like Joe called it. Joe called that they would beat the Seahawks and lose to the Redskins. Past matters. And I'm telling you, I just don't know. I want them to, but I think the biggest thing for them as well, right now they're 4-0 and Ben Roethlisberger is out and the Ravens look bad. So they need to win like 14 games, 13 games, and get that bye week. Have a home game, have some momentum, feel like you're a big dog because they really need to beat the Steelers and Ravens this year and convince that they are. But this will be, and I think for either one of these teams, it's going to be a huge win, and for the one that loses, it might be a reality check.
Yeah, I mean they look like the favorites there right now. So I don't know. It's they have to have the whole Andy Dalton thing end with it, in terms of him being a total choker, like that whole narrative. They need to have that end and get that monkey off their back and everything. But the way they're playing right now, I mean, it really doesn't matter. Like looking down that far, the way they're playing right now, they're probably one of the top, teams or top teams in the AFC. Definitely the top teams in the AFC and one of the top teams in the NFL right now. So. To your point earlier, I was looking at their lineup here on our lads.
Yeah,
they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 first round picks on their roster right now. AJ Green, Zeitler, Smith, Eifert, Kirkpatrick, Leon Hall, Darqueze Dennard. And then they've got Andy Dalton, Jeremy Hill, and Jake Fisher, second rounders on offense. And then Carlos Dunlap, second rounder. Marcus Hunt, second rounder. Ray Malalaga, second rounder.
Yeah, Marcus Hunt. I forgot about him.
Yeah, they've kept so many of their draft picks over the years. Giovanni Bernard is a second rounder.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, Mike Brown, the owner and general manager, one of the only guys that does that in the NFL, along with Jerry Jones. I mean, it's kind of interesting. You'd think that after all those years of being terrible, that they wouldn't know all of a sudden. There must have been some change because over the last 5 years, they've drafted amazingly.
yeah, I don't know what's going on, but every year I like their draft, and it's really starting to pay off for them, obviously.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about those draft picks and their drafts and Paul Brown with Ken Broo. I'm going to text it to you.
Okay.
The phone number.
All right, I'm going to dial here. You can talk first.
Yeah. Tight.
Busy? I haven't heard that in forever.
He's an older guy. Might be a landline.
Yeah.
Might double check the number. That's what he said.
Okay, I'll try it again.
Your call did not go through. Please try your call again. 116G.
That doesn't sound good.
Just email him real quick.
Okay. Dude, so many people are such idiots on Twitter. It's unbelievable.
Just remember that what you say here is still going out to the world.
I don't care. People should know that they're idiots.
Yeah, fair enough. Is giving us a... Hopefully he responds immediately. Try the number on my phone. Yeah, getting the same signal. Don't have to dial 1 first, right?
I don't think so. I can try that.
Why not?
Okay, hold on. I'm pretty sure that doesn't make a difference, but...
Yeah, it's not like 1995 or anything.
Okay.
Your call did not go through. Please try your call again.
And all three messages, we got a busy signal, then we got a lady.
Something weird is going on here.
Man, your request to caption that picture, do you have one that you like?
There were a few funny ones, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, let me look back.
It is crazy that they're both over 40 in the NFL.
I was going to say something along like, I don't know, something about how they're really old.
Man, we're old. You got that right. I was thinking about something about like, oh, like 2 guys win contest. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Forget it. Come on, Ken.
If you're listening live, this is really good radio.
Yeah, if you're listening live, though, you're pretty much a mega fan, so...
So you don't care.
Yeah, you're just nice to hear the dulcet tones of me and Danny talking to one another.
And me breathing and working on something else while we wait.
Yep, riveting. Oh, man.
Riveting.
I'm excited for the game tonight.
Yeah? Matt Hasselbeck?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I just sort of bought into the hype that it just sort of, isn't it sort of weird, like Andrew Luck there was not a play that he got injured on. It's that I know of, right?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's like mysterious.
What's wrong with him?
Something wrong, with his shoulder or whatever.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I guess if he's having a problem, then I guess it makes sense because of the short week to sit him against a team that you were probably going to beat anyway, the Jaguars.
Yeah.
And yet here we are, and he's not playing still, so I guess it must be serious.
I thought you were going to say you're buying into the thing that he's sitting out because of the ownership issues and everything.
No, I don't know anything about that.
Oh, I guess like Pagano and not ownership, but Pagano and the GM are bickering or whatever.
Uh-huh.
They're doing like the San Francisco thing.
Pagano's he's going to get fired for sure.
You think?
Their best football that they've played with Andrew Luck has come with Bruce Arians, I think,
Yeah.
So it's like, obviously, I just think that you can't, obviously they need to, I know like they went to the AFC Championship, but it's such a garbage division that they play in.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter. Yeah, I thought if anything, it was like, okay, if you sit him and then we can blame how terrible he is on his shoulder or whatever. Because it is funny, like Andrew Luck, I know I talked so much shit about him. I like him. I like him as a person. I think that he has a lot of potential as a quarterback. I think obviously he's one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, like when he's on. I think that's fair. Obviously the problems come in when people say he's like 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't understand that. But it's like right now, a lot of the numbers, it's not as though Andrew Luck is an average quarterback. He ranks dead last in a lot of categories. The worst. In a league that has Ryan Mallett, Andrew Luck is worse. And it's like, and you can't sit here and tell me he doesn't have any help. Like Russ, like we've been saying, more than half the teams in the NFL have a bad offensive line. Most of the talent now is on defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, that's what makes it harder to, play and to defend them every week. So most of them have a bad offensive line. Some of them are lucky enough, like the Bengals, to have a good offensive line. And I think that's just one thing. And even then, he plays worse. Like when they say like he's in the ESPN article today, when they're like, oh, he's the most hit-ass thrown quarterback in the NFL over the last 4 years, he shouldn't be throwing the ball as he's getting hit. those lead interceptions. Like, I know that sometimes you have no idea, and that but he's trying to do too much, and it's like that's the type. And where Russell Wilson has the most throwaways in that same period of time.
Right.
So it's like Russell Wilson's like protect the ball, Andrew Luck's like make a play, and to me, that's where you end up with leading the league in interceptions over the last 2 years.
Turnovers too, fumbles too.
Yeah, total turnovers. So to me, it's like he's not playing smartly. So that's the thing for my thing. But I do think that, hey, if they get a different offensive, if they did a different coach in there, different offensive coordinator, someone who's not as interested in breaking records and is more interested in winning, then I think they'll do better. Ken Broo gave me the wrong number, so here we go.
Okay.
He just emailed me back. I'll have to text it to you again, just in case someone's listening. He just texted me.
You're whispering it.
Saying. Oopsie. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I see the difference here. All right.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I think we got it this time. Dialing.
Perfect.
Hello.
Hey, Ken. It's Ken.
Hey, I'm sorry about that. It must have been my fat finger on that one number.
No problem. Not a problem at all. I'm here with Danny Kelly, my co-host.
Hey, Ken. How's it going?
Hey, Dan. Dan, what's up, man?
Not too much. Doing well.
Cool. So I guess we'll just get right into it and talk some Bengals and Hawks. How's that sound?
Let's go for it, man. It ought to be a good game.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go. Reel in the field goals. We're here with Ken Broo of WRCO. Is that correct, Ken, in Cincinnati?
CPO.
Oops. We're here with Ken Broo of WCPO. You know,
I don't care. It doesn't matter.
I've always felt that if you make a mistake and then have to correct it live on air, people will remember it better. So
I do that twice a week.
Ken, obviously the Seahawks and the Bengals, they play this Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, but it's always been a bit of an issue for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm not sure how time zones affect the Bengals, but it'll be a morning game. I expect it to be their toughest game that they've played. At least the matchup on paper, it looks to be their toughest game they've played in 3 years. And I'm including Super Bowls. I'm including at Green Bay. And it all starts this year, it seems like, with Andy Dalton, who is apparently going to be the MVP and crowned the best player in the world, right?
Yeah. Well, as long as he doesn't have to play on prime time and in playoffs, yeah, he could be the whole world. But when the lights come on, the dude wilts. And, in January, it's quickly basketball season if the Bengals are in the playoffs. But, I'll say this for the guy. He is not getting his team beat this year. Last year he did. And, through 4 games, he hasn't been sacked. But he's living on the edge. There was a fumble return for a touchdown against San Diego that was within a hair's breadth of being just that, but it was reversed on replay. And then he had the fumble return last week on a strip sack that he gave up in that game last week. But he's not sitting back there and taking the hit like he did in years past. And I think that's the biggest difference with him. He gets rid of the ball awfully quick.
Yeah.
And do you expect him, obviously you said, when the lights come on, he wilts. So is the general expectation right now that he's going to kind of get over that, get the monkey off his back, or do you guys kind of expect that to just continue this year again?
Well, if you know anything about Cincinnati, we expect the worst and then hope to be pleasantly surprised about everything. I mean, the sky falls in this town on a daily basis. And honestly, and I talked about this on the radio, the fan base here has a real self-esteem problem. And I guess it might be from all the years that the that the Bengals were horrid all the years, that the Reds were just terrible. So they kind of braced themselves for bad news. And I guarantee you there's a large segment out here that are convinced that this has just been a canard the first month, and that suddenly, Cinderella will fall off of her pumpkin. So it's really tough to me to gauge just how good he's been, because frankly they haven't really played great defense. Best defense they'll play this year so far, at least.
The Bengals, they are 34-16-1 dating back to the beginning of 2012, which is a great record. Obviously, as you pointed out, they haven't won a playoff game in any of those years. That's become a problem. But I'm kind of curious, what is the relationship between Marvin Lewis and Mike Brown? It seems as though so many other coaches would have been fired around 2007, 2008. Some other coaches, even going to the playoffs would not be enough. What exactly is the relationship there that keeps Marvin Lewis's job safe? And is this the year that he has to win a playoff game?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you watched Hard Knocks the first time the Bengals were on, there was a scene in Hard Knocks where Mike Brown was sitting in the front of a classroom, and every Bengal coach, including Marvin Lewis, were sitting in classroom chairs. And it was almost as if Brown was lecturing. And the things that he was saying were, at some points, absurd. Okay, we have tight ends. Can we take this tight end and make him a defensive lineman? And like the coaches are sitting there, like, not trying to make the guy look stupid. And my point being is that for many years, from the time he got here in 2003 until 2011, he basically did whatever Brown wanted to do from a personnel standpoint. He was, in essence, a coach and just took whatever the Bengals told him he had to take. And by the Bengals, I mean the family, the Brown family. Mike Brown, his daughter, his son-in-law, and Mike Brown's brother were basically the ones that ran the team from a personnel decision. Chris Henry is a great example, the late Chris Henry. He ran into all of these problems here, and they finally said, that's enough, we're getting rid of him. And at the pre-season luncheon that the Bengals had that year, right before they started training camp, Marvin Lewis was asked, well, will Chris Henry be rejoining the team? And he said, no, we're done with Chris Henry. And 2 days later, they report for camp, and there's Chris Henry because the owner wanted him. Well, after the 2010 season, when this thing really turned into a circus, when they had T.O. and Chad Johnson and all that, Marvin would have gone anywhere. I mean, if there was a high school job in Seattle, he would have taken it. He just wanted out.
Yeah.
Mike didn't want to let him go for two reasons. First, Mike hates to fire coaches. And secondly, Mike doesn't talk to the media, and Marvin is his front guy. He can trot Marvin out all the time and talk to the media. So the two of them came to this, come to Jesus understanding that Mike was going to cede control of the team to Marvin. Marvin would have more input into coaches, which some of whom you got to inherit if you take the job here, and players. That was in January of 2011. Within weeks, they fired the offensive coordinator, Bob Radkowski. They hired Jay Gruden. They told Carson Palmer to take a hike. They drafted A.J. Green in round 1, and they drafted Andy Dalton in round 2. And all of a sudden, the team took off. But it took that moment for Mike Brown to understand the real beauty of having Marvin Lewis. So, I think the dynamic between the two of them can survive playoff losses and primetime, stumbling. I think it's really strong because Mike finally realized Marvin kind of knew what he was doing.
I mean, if you look at the Bengals roster, I mean, that is a really, really talented roster, and the vast majority of those players come from the draft. So, I mean, I guess that's Marvin Lewis just doing his thing in the draft most recently, with some of the picks that he's made over the last couple of years have been really good. Two of those picks I've really liked are Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard. There's kind of a timeshare right now, running back by committee sort of thing. What do you think how do they split that up? Is there any method to it, or is it just kind of a hot hand kind of thing?
Well, Hill's the guy. He's, the only reason why Bernard's getting any kind of action now is because Hill put the ball on the ground a couple of times, I think, in the Chargers game. And that's when Bernard came off the bench and performed well. But Gio Bernard was a lost ball in August during preseason. They couldn't figure out what to do with him. But yeah, it's kind of cool. It's kind of like what this team had when they had Ickey Woods and they had James Brooks. And Brooks was the kind of Gio Bernard guy where he could slash and cut and had great speed, and then Ickey would pound it. Hill pounds it. But I think that I think Hill's the guy. Hill will get. I would be shocked if he didn't start the game on Sunday and didn't get the majority of carries.
4 years ago, when these teams played, I distinctly remember, almost perhaps for a lot of fans, it was the first time hearing Richard Sherman talk trash, and he decided to talk trash about fellow rookie AJ Green, and saying that he was overrated. This year, he's changed his tune a little bit and said he's a great receiver, but he did stop Green from having a huge game. He had 63 yards and a touchdown, and the Bengals won by 22. But I don't necessarily expect AJ Green to be a problem for the Seahawks this week, just because they've been so good at stopping number ones. However, I do see a lot of other problems that go beyond that. So can you talk to me a little bit about Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and Tyler Eifert, and sort of the seasons that they're having? Have they always been this way and a little bit under the radar? I know Eifert was hurt last year. Or is this them breaking out of their shell a little bit?
Eifert's Dalton's comfort zone. If he's kind of like the pacifier to the baby. When Dalton's got to make a throw, that's who he's looking to. Now, Green will get the high profile throws simply because he's tall and he's rangy and he's got terrific speed. But Eifert's the guy. He'll cut through the seam over the middle, and he'll be the guy that Dalton will throw to, I think, more often than not this season. Jones is good. Jones has pure speed and kind of takes advantage of the fact that everybody or every team so far has doubled AJ Green. Last week, inexplicably, the Chiefs decided not to, and Green ate him up. And then when they did, then it opened things up for Marvin Jones and Sanu. Sanu, I think, is just a guy. I know he's got good speed as well. I don't think in a perfect world he's anybody's number one or number two wide receiver, but he has talent. But I would say that the 1-2 punch is Green and Eifert, and I think Eifert gets the majority of throws simply because Dalton just likes him. They're just in sync. And then the other thing you got to be careful of, I don't understand why defenses haven't been hip to this, but there's a guy on this team named Rex Burkhead who came out of Nebraska, and he was like a 5th or a 6th round pick, and he's like the 53rd guy on the roster. But every time he comes into the game, he wears number 33. Every time he comes into the game, they throw to him. Now, what I don't get is why defenses don't understand that, and they try and defend him on those plays. But why for him, too? Because there's a whole package of plays for this dude as well. They have so many weapons. That's why I think the Bengals have a chance to be a really good team this year. They have so many weapons. They'll outscore you. And most offenses don't have the firepower to keep up with them.
Mm-hmm.
And sticking with the offense, the offensive line struggles around the NFL have been kind of documented recently. The Seahawks are obviously having some issues there. They're on pace to set an NFL record in sacks, which is a dubious honor. How has the offensive line for the Bengals looked? I get the impression that they're among the league's better units. Is that something that you'd say is accurate?
Absolutely. They haven't allowed it. I don't believe they've allowed Dalton to be sacked this year. Although I don't understand why the play on Sunday last week that was a strip and a fumble, why that wouldn't be ruled a sack. But anyway, he hasn't been sacked officially this year. They have two really good tackles, Andrew Whitworth, who is a 10-year veteran and is probably moving on after next season. They've kind of like set themselves up for the future. And Andre Smith, who up until 2 years ago was just a fat tub of goo, but really and truly put himself in a position to get in better shape and to play the game at a high level. He's up after this season and will make a boatload of money. And then their interior line is okay. It's not great. Kevin Zeitler is a third-year guy from Wisconsin, a first-round pick. Chris Bowling is, again, I think just a guy, but is playing pretty well at left tackle. And then they drafted Russell Bodine from North Carolina last year. He's in his second year. He's struggling a little bit, but by and large, as a group, they play well. And then they've set themselves up for the future. They drafted tackles in round 1 and round 2 this year. Cedric Ogbuehi from Texas A&M, and Jake Fisher. So they're really set up long haul to be a pretty good offensive line, but clearly that's the strength of all the other, skill guys. That's the strength of the offense, because if you don't let your quarterback get touched, any quarterback with any acumen is going to have time to carve up a defense.
Speaking of the clown show that you mentioned in 2010, one of the guys that they brought in that year was Adam Jones, who would seem to fall in line with being a part of the clown show. This guy was out of the league at one point. It looked like he couldn't come back, and then he comes back and he resurfaces with Cincinnati. 6 seasons later, he's sort of playing better than he ever has. Can you sort of explain the evolution of Adam Jones on the Bengals?
Well, when he came here, he bottomed out. I heard on a radio show this week that Jones said, quote, "Marvin Lewis saved my life." Lewis called him after, when it was after he got cut by Dallas, and he said, "Look, come on in, we're going to work you out. If you got anything, we're going to sign you." Jones is 32, or will be soon, but he really is 28, because he missed, or in his career, if you go back and you look at suspensions and injuries, this guy's missed close to 50 games. So that's 50 games without any kind of wear and tear in your body. And, just do the math. If an offense gets 60 snaps a game and this guy's missed 50 games, I mean, what is that? 30,000? Not 30,000. It's 3,000 games the guys. Well, it's not that either. I really didn't have this.
We're not good at math.
You get the idea, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's a young 32, and I think he's their best cornerback. They've finally gotten some good play out of Dre Kirkpatrick. Leon Hall is a genetic marvel. He's playing with 2 Achilles tendons that snap. So, but I still think if you've got to have a guy in that secondary that makes a play, it's Adam Jones. And he's, and honestly, if I got sued for $12 million for doing something in a strip club, I'd probably grow up too. But
yeah,
he grew up in a hurry after that, and has really dedicated himself to football. He's in phenomenal shape. He's a little bitty guy. I mean, I don't understand how he can return punts and take that punishment. So I just think it's a question of, he realizes that, it's a finite number of years you can pay, and he does have some significant debt because of his legal trouble. And he's taking care of himself. But I think he's their best corner. I don't know how effectively he'll play Sunday. He has an elbow issue and he has a groin problem, but he's practiced all week. So I know he'll play. I just don't know how effectively.
The Seahawks recently had an issue with the player and money and all that, with Cam Chancellor holding out the first 2 games. They've gotten him back now, and the defense has looked significantly better. There's a guy on the Bengals defense that a lot of the Seahawks fans kind of had in the back of their mind when he was coming out of Boise State, because he was in the same sort of mold as Cam Chancellor, and that's George Aloka. It sounds like he's kind of come into his own in that defense. Tell us a little bit about how he's played and what kind of role he plays on that defense.
Well, he's first of all, he's extremely intelligent on and off the field. He understands things before they happen. That's what the coaches say. He just anticipates so well. Mm-hmm. And he's tall. I mean, and he's a really hard hitter. Their safeties are pretty darn good. They've got him, and they've got Reggie Nelson, who began his career with the Jaguars. I think that's really kind of an unheralded strength. Now, I'll be interested to see if Iloka can play at what speed this week. He's had an ankle issue, but I think that that's a guy that if you look at it, and I think, they've got, after they signed Green, I think they've got like 19 guys that are up after this year, and Iloka is one of them. It'll be interesting to see how they spread the money around. But if I was that franchise, I would seriously putting him to the top of the list of people that I want to keep.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that the Bengals could be running into money troubles, just for the same fact of how the Seahawks have had to let go of some guys that maybe they didn't want to, and probably are preparing to let go of, maybe even Chancellor. Because when I look around, I don't even understand how it doesn't make logical sense, because I look at so many guys that were first-round picks. I'm like, how many first-round picks have Cincinnati had? It's a very talented team. You've mentioned Rex Burkhead on offense. Who's a guy on defense that maybe most fans don't know about that's really important to Cincinnati's success?
Well, that's going to be up after this year?
No, just a guy that the Seahawks should maybe be worried about this Sunday. That's playing that an X Factor type underrated guy.
I would say this, the guy that I think is the heart and soul of that defense is Vontaze Burfict. I think that defense is just at a different level when he plays. Now the problem is he's not playing. He's been out really for all intents and purposes since the middle of last season. But in his stead, they've been starting a guy named Vincent Ray, R-E-Y, and out of Duke, and he's not only their leading tackler, he just makes big plays. He's really taken the opportunity that's presented himself. I think you'll hear his name called a lot. The other guy, I think that you'll hear his name called a lot, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that follows football, is Geno Atkins. He blew his knee out 2 years ago. He came back last year, and he really wasn't at full strength. He is now. And everyone, guys, I can go back to at least three or four plays, in every one of these first 4 games where Atkins has just blown his guy up and thrown him back into the quarterback. It's amazing, really and truly, just how good this guy is. So if you're looking for 2 guys on Sunday, I would say Atkins and Vincent Ray. I think you'll hear their names called a lot.
I think you can tell that we both admire the Bengals as a team. I think we both recognize it's extremely talented, and they're a team that's playing really well right now. Is there any sort of weakness that the Seahawks could attack on this team? Like, what would you do if you were the Seahawks coming into Cincinnati this week?
Well, I would like to. I know Russell Wilson is a mobile quarterback. I would like to see how they perform against that. I think the Bengals are very susceptible to a good power back. Jamal Charles ran very well last week and had a lot of touches with passing too. Now, I don't know if Marshawn Lynch is going to play or not, but if he were healthy and could play, I'd be very interested to see that, because traditionally this team has not dealt with the run very well. And, they've tried to make teams one-dimensional. They basically said to Alex Smith last week, okay, dude, beat us. Which, I think we both know Alex Smith isn't capable of.
Right.
But I would say that's probably the one thing that the Bengals struggle with the most is a good power back. And the interior of that defense is, I wouldn't say it's their strength. It's when a guy's got to go back and throw 30, 35, 40 times. That's when they've got that defense where they want it, because they have good pressure up front, good pure pressure up front. They had 20 sacks in 16 games last year. They re-signed Michael Johnson. He was a free agent. He had gone to Tampa for a year. It didn't work out. He came back. And I believe they had 5 sacks last year. I think they've got 11 or 12 on the season. So they're really good when they're put in a position where all they have to do is just rush the quarterback. If you can run on Cincinnati, you got a chance to beat them.
If we were to wrap up our talk about the Bengals in a bow, I always like to hear the perspective of someone that's actually living it, in the same way that I don't think that if you're outside of Seattle, you can really know the experience of living the Seahawks for, their existence as a franchise and really the emotions attached to that. And, last week we had Michael Gray from Detroit in to talk about the Lions. In week 1, we had Joe McAtee from St. Louis to talk about the Rams. And you see, there's a theme with some of these franchises that have not been successful, and it just goes over and over again. The Bengals, haven't won a playoff game since 1990, but here we are, and they look and they're playing like the best team in the NFL, or at least, right up there with the Patriots. And it all seems to be coming together, and, you could get Perfect back mid-season. There's a lot of reason when you're going to get probably maybe one game with the Steelers without Ben Roethlisberger. There's an opportunity for Cincinnati to really go into the playoffs with a head of steam. So I want to ask you, Ken, do you believe in your heart that the Bengals can actually do something in the playoffs this year?
Yeah, it's funny. People always ask that question. It's the number one concern out here, and my answer is always, you got to get there first. And just because you're 4-0 doesn't mean that you get there. It's true. I think it's like 83% of the teams historically that have started the season 4-0 make the playoffs.
Yep.
Their biggest last year they didn't have anybody. I mean, they didn't have Green. They were really depleted on defense last year. And they went to Indianapolis, and at the time, the Colts were playing really well. The only clunker I think that they've had appearances in the last 4 years was when they had San Diego in here a couple of years ago. They were better than San Diego, and they played horribly. And the conditions were rainy and it was cold, but you would think that would be to their advantages to opposed to a team from Southern California. They didn't take advantage of it. So do I think they can? Yeah, I think they can. I think that once you get by New England, I think you're hard-pressed to find anybody in the AFC that's better than them, really and truly. And I'm not saying that because I live in Cincinnati. I get paid the same whether this team wins or loses. But I don't think there's another team in the AFC you can look at and say, you know what, that team is better than Cincinnati. And if you look on their schedule, I don't see any team on their schedule that I look at and say, you know what, there's no way in hell they win that game. No way. I think they can go to Pittsburgh and beat the Steelers. I think they can beat Baltimore here or there. I think they've just got Baltimore's number, and I don't think Baltimore's very good. I don't think there's any reason why they can't go to Arizona and beat the Cardinals. I don't think there's any reason why they can't beat the Seahawks on Sunday. Those days, that ship has sailed here. The biggest problem the Bengals have, really and truly, boils down to what is Andy Dalton. And if this is the Andy Dalton that's going to be the Andy Dalton for the entire season, it's going to be a really special year here. But if he reverts to bad Andy, if they go back to the things that got them nuked in games the last couple of years when Dalton tried to do too much or they couldn't protect him, then they've got a problem. But honestly, I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm sitting here tonight. I don't see another team on that schedule that they can't beat. And in over 30 years of covering this team, even through the good times, the Super Bowl year and when they went to the playoffs in 91, I guess it was, in the last 4 years, I don't think I could ever say something like that. But I can say it now. I think this team is pretty darn good.
Yeah, I think that there are some games that I think will be really good to watch. They'll be very close. I think Buffalo is pretty good, so at Buffalo next week. I think Arizona will be an interesting game. I think at Denver will be an interesting game. But I definitely always got it in the back of the mind. Like for the last 4 years, it was always to me like I want to believe in Cincinnati. I like to see teams like Cincinnati win, but when it came to beating the Steelers and Ravens, they couldn't get it done. They couldn't put themselves in that position. So I think as long as they get over that hump, if they go into Pittsburgh in Week 8 and just beat the crap out of the Steelers, then I feel much more comfortable that there is a difference this season.
Yeah, and it's all about health. See, I don't view this as a 16-game season. Never have. I view it as 16 individual seasons inside of 3.5 months. And so much is predicated on health. Everybody thought the Steelers were going – not everybody. I think Sports Illustrated picked the Steelers to win the North and play in the Super Bowl. But Ben Roethlisberger got hurt. Well, that changed things. Same thing in Baltimore. Steve Smith is gone for a while. If Andy Dalton goes down, they may not make the playoffs. If AJ Green gets hurt, it changes what they do dynamically. I'm convinced that the talent level, by and large, unless you're one of the dregs teams, by and large, the talent level in this league is so close that the difference is always who's healthy and who can play, and if they can play, how much can they? What level can they play at? This is a league anymore of who stays healthy and who doesn't. Well
said, and yeah, that's definitely kind of how it goes every year, and it's a battle of attrition. But I think that the Bengals are set up with so much depth that they could be pretty good this year. They could give a lot of people a run for their money. So we're both really looking forward to this game on Sunday, and we just want to say thanks a bunch for joining us. You were highly informative, and really appreciate it.
Well, I wish you'd tell somebody that I work for out here that I'm highly informative. It might make my life. So if you wouldn't mind, could you drop a note?
Can do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ken.
Ken Broo. That you can follow Ken at Ken BROO.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Well, that was great. Do you have anything to add to that, Kenny?
To the conversation? I think it's interesting as well. Andy Dalton, just talking about whether or not Andy Dalton will continue this run or implode or whatever. And it's just unlike most quarterbacks, I feel like, if you look at the Bengals last year, they were a playoff team. They were a good team, obviously. Andy Dalton, he wasn't as good, obviously, as he is now through 4 games. But through 5 games last year, he had a quarterback rating of 98.4. And then playing at home against the Browns, Andy Dalton last season was 10 of 33 for 86 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a quarterback rating of 2. So I think that's 2. So I think there's always something in the back of your mind when you watch Andy Dalton play, or when you try and follow Andy Dalton. There's always something in the back of your mind that he's going to have a quarterback rating of 2. So, and that was at home, and that was against a team that's the Browns. That they were better last year, but they're not the Seahawks. And I don't expect Andy Dalton to have a pass rating of 2 this week. But I think that he is due for at least an average game.
Right.
Over the first 4 games, he's posted passer ratings of 115.9, 126.1, 122.3, and 127.1. He's just the 4th quarterback in NFL history to have a rating of at least 115 in each of his first 4 games of the season. And I just don't think necessarily that he's going to have a huge game this weekend. Do you have any do you think that I know the problems with the secondary in the first couple of games without Cam Chancellor, and we've seen him in the second 2 games, and that we've seen how effective they've been at home. Do you think that the secondary is back to the level that they were, over the last couple of years?
I think they are. I mean, there's no reason. Well, I mean, I guess, you have to be you have to keep in mind that Jimmy Clausen's really not challenging you downfield, so that game doesn't necessarily count. But I think, the way they played against the Lions was definitely encouraging. It just feels like they're back. They're back to kind of playing their brand of ball. And so I mean, I have no real reason to think that they're not kind of back to what we think of them as, like the Legion of Boom, and kind of, the suffocating style, not letting anything get over their heads type of thing. So, I've been really encouraged with that the last couple of games, and I think that's going to carry over. And they're going to be well prepared for Cincinnati to try and throw it over their heads. And that's kind of what they've done to teams this year. I think there's no teams in the NFL right now that have more deep shots down the field. So I think the Seahawks are going to be really prepared for that. And that's kind of their thing. That's actually what I think they want you to do, because that's their wheelhouse. So,
yeah. I think that I came into the game believing that the Bengals were a good team, like I said, but really talking it out with Ken and with you, it just really hits home. Like, this is a really good team, a really talented team. So it's going to be tough, but I do think that, like I said to Ken, I do think that they'll have, I mean, obviously AJ Green is very talented, but I do have faith in Richard Sherman, as well as the job that, Kerry Williams has done, as well as Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor. So, and I think that they can key in on that. I'm more afraid of Tyler Eifert. I'm more afraid of what they can do in the passing game with Gio Bernard and Marvin Jones. So some of those other type of players and that's the thing, is that they're so deep, that even if you stop AJ Green, they're gonna have other options to go to. Yeah,
exactly. They're multi-talented. They have a lot of weapons. It's going to be a really good challenge for the Seahawks. I did actually pick the Bengals in this game. Not to say that I don't have faith in the Seahawks at all. I do have a lot of faith in the Seahawks, but I just think that the Bengals are just playing out of their minds right now. Well,
that's what I told my cousin when we were emailing about the game, and I was just like, it's probably the toughest game that they'll play in a few years. It's not looking good. And he was like, no, well, I think they can win. And I was like, I think they can win, but it's like 40-60 maybe. It's like, I would give them about a 40% chance. They're up against it in so many ways, but they are also themselves so good that they might still be able to do something. I mean, and it always changes. Once kickoff happens, things just change, and you just start to see the game in a new light. And maybe the Seahawks get out to a 14-0 lead, and then it's all about, can they hold on? And maybe they get down 14-0, and they're a second half team, and they come back and win. It's a lot of things could happen. We've seen the games turn unexpectedly a lot. You look at, they almost lost to the Lions at the end of just like, what is happening? It can happen real quick, and just because you're an underdog doesn't mean you're going to lose. And one of the interesting things that I saw, this guy Jimmy is always emailing me these odds or whatever from Bovada.
Yeah.
And this week's news and notes or whatever, it was like the Bengals, anytime they've ever won 4 games in a row, the next week they are like 3-8-1.
Mm-hmm.
And the Seahawks, it's like anytime that they've been underdogs in the Russell Wilson era, they're like 11-2-1 or something like that. So that there are things working in their favor and against the Bengals' favor, just because, you win 4 games in a row, it's like for Cincinnati, the Fates don't always have it in it for them to win 5 games in a row. So we'll see what happens.
Definitely. It's going to be a good one. Should be probably the best game in that whole slate of early games on Sunday. So it's going to be fun.
It's good. And, at least with the early game, we can watch it, wake up, watch it, get it over with, hopefully have a win to talk about for the rest of the day and move on with the rest of our lives. So that is this episode of Reel in the Field Goals. Make sure to subscribe to iTunes, or, you can also, we're going to have this as a SoundCloud link that you can play. Can they download it, Danny?
Yeah, they can. You can download it from SoundCloud.
Cool. So you can either download the link
from iTunes, of course, obviously, as well.
Yeah. So iTunes, if you subscribe to Reel in the Field Goals, we'll have that link up. And SoundCloud, if you want to download it or play it that way, then you can do that. And but we like the subscriptions because it means you're going to automatically get these and not forget. And that includes after the game. So sometime Sunday afternoon, we'll have an instant reaction podcast talking about hopefully the Seahawks win over Cincinnati to get to 3-2. But if not, it'll be okay too. So that's it for this week. How should we say goodbye this week, Danny?
Don't forget to check out the Ballard Agency online and tell them Field Goal sent you.
BallardAgency.com and 425-454-3510. And tell them Field Goal sent you.